Hi, everybody, or good afternoon, good evening, whatever you want to call it. This is Lachi Opponent, Alfred Yang, and after a very long hiatus, we are back, me and my intrepid co-host Thomas M.
Hello there.
Uh, and I don't actually know exactly what spurred this, but it seems like a good time to talk about things with a lot of exciting developments in the world of English Weiss. I think a lot of people have their misgivings about Weiss Schwartz in general. But I've also heard some people who really like this current format, mostly because they're winning a lot in this format. But either way, I think it's probably good to just get some grounding, figure out where we are right now. How have you been, Tom?
I've been doing great. Um, been
It,
healthy, staying out of trouble.
I was able to confirm that myself. I visited the states and saw Tom very briefly for a weekend, but I think that it's good that health has been prioritized. How about on the Weiss side of things? What's been going there?
Oh, not that much. I've been playing probably the least amount of Weiss I have been for a while.
Yeah,
Um,
you've gone like head first into Yu-Gi-Oh!
yeah, I've gone rogue a little bit. Uh, like
Rogue, he says,
I
as he builds meta decks.
yeah. I tried the game briefly in March for the 250th YCS in Los Angeles, and I took to the game more than I thought I would, and I've been enjoying myself a lot more than I thought I would, to be honest, based on what my prior concept like perception of the game was before having started playing it. But yeah, it's been fun. Um,
It definitely seems like your kind of game, very complex with a lot of lines, very rewarding to some degree, but also with that whole, well, I lost the coin flip, so maybe I'm just going to lose this game thing, and I think that's
yeah,
something people like to get out of card games.
not a perfect game by any means. Not a perfect company by any means. Uh, but
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely value in it. Very close knit community. I think that's something other games could potentially learn from.
yeah,
But
that's actually the reason why part of the reason why I kept playing was like the community here. There's a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh players in my area, as well as the Wise community, which I love and hold dear to my
mm,
heart. But
but before we become a spook show for Yu-Gi-Oh, I guess I'll briefly mention what I've been doing, which is mostly Magic Draft. Honestly speaking, I play Weiss every weekend or two, but it's mostly just for fun decks because I don't have an enormous amount of fun with the current English or Japanese metas. And in fact, I don't actually have a up to date met. Well, I have a English deck that I would argue is meta, but it's not one of the typical, one of the usual suspects.
yeah,
But
I've
yeah,
been playing Wise here and there too. Keeping up to date on the meta. Um,
hmm.
I'm planning on going to Anaheim, so can't let myself become too washed.
Yeah. I mean, aside from my occasional forays into locals, very occasional, I'm mostly just talking to people and trying to keep abreast of what the builds look like. And Riaz keeps coming in my PMs. Hi, Riaz. Uh, telling me what he's going to play, and I'm like, oh, doesn't really matter. You're going to win anyway. So I guess that's where we are. So one of the big reasons I think that well, you and or I decided it might be good to fire another cast is there's been some interesting posts on I'm gonna keep calling it Twitter. I don't care what Elon says. It's still Twitter to me. Uh, including a teaser image of an upcoming restriction. Ooh, scary. Hey, we're using the screen for something. I think this is really I think this is cool. I think more companies need to do stuff like this because it really fires discussion and makes people start thinking about the game competitively. Basically, it's saying this is what the new lists are going to look like going forward, and we still have a few days before then. Maybe a couple dozen people might listen to this cast and get in on the guessing. but basically they're going to do a pretty big ban list insofar as English Wise is concerned. I don't think we've had one. Well, we might have had one this big, but this is one of the bigger ones I've seen for English Wise.
Yeah, for sure. I think the last one that was supposed to be this big was the DAL one. I
That
think.
only hit Data Live though, didn't it?
It hit Kaguya too. Well,
Oh yeah, it did hit
remember?
Kaguya.
Yeah,
Look, I try to erase I try to erase incorrect, like objectively incorrect bans from my memory.
It's
That was
so
an
that was so unjustified. It was insane.
unnecessary, unjustified, like it had okay results, but the results weren't even like putting it in the top 3 of decks. It was just a copycat from JP.
I mean, they were just
But
online.
pretty
And it
much.
didn't even dominate the way that you'd expect a deck
No, and
that would be like, because like it was obviously just a down meta at that point as
I
well.
mean,
So
I consider that ban list to actually just be the Danmachi ban list because it just killed the 2 decks that Danmachi was good against.
yeah, and then
But
they killed the last deck that Damachi was good against last fall.
Mushoku.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This is a
because they
similar
really
ban list in that vein, in the sense that
mm,
they're looking to shake things up, mid format, which
so there was
a lot of people have opinions on.
a spicy tweet from the underpaid intern on Twitter saying that they were cooking. So I really hope that this is something that comes out and surprises us.
I heard that they actually tried to make this different from the Japanese ban list, um which is cool.
Good.
I think it's
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, it's good. That there's some amount of thought being put into the ban list beyond copying Japanese's
Copying
homework.
JP.
JP's homework, yeah.
Is slime limited in Japanese?
I don't remember.
If not, then
Uh,
spoilers for what we might be talking about later. Slime might actually end up being the first deck that is banned in English before it's banned in Japanese.
let's see. Current JP ban list. No, I think the last change was the Hololive changes.
Hmm.
So current. If we're talking about English relevant stats here, the restrictions that matter the most that currently exist in the JP side are Hololive
Hololive,
choose.
yeah.
They added I think 3 more cards to the choose one of 2 that already existed, which were the 2/1 Amelia Watson, the 3/2 Gura finisher, and the 3/2 Kanata. Those were all added to choose one of 5. We already have the IMA ban because that card is
a design mistake.
Yes. Let's see. Sword Art Online, where they banned the Alice Brainstorm completely, and they added to the already existing choose one of 2 the Sword of Liana Salvager that sacks itself.
Yes.
To salvage,
and it's Leafa, isn't it?
And Leafa, yeah, the salvager that can stock a card from your hand on play.
Yeah. By definition, we can't get that ban list because we don't have the light level set. So if we do
not
get
the
an
same
SAO
exact
ban,
one, but they could. But as you see here, we have a choose one of 2 as one of the mystery.
Yeah, but
we could conceivably get that, but they said they're not copying homework this time.
I would be surprised if it was just Sortalina plus Leafa. I don't think that does enough to damage the deck.
Probably not.
So I'm not convinced that's what's going to happen.
It could involve Alice Brainstorm somehow.
I think it probably will. If it's literally Alice Brainstorm and 2/1 Alice, I think I might just lose all faith in push. That's not going to happen, right? I really don't. I mean, if they really want credit than that.
If they really wanted people to stop playing Alice, then sure, that is a potential outcome.
That's literally just functionally the same as banning the Brainstorm vote. So that's not going to happen.
That'd be really lame as well. And the last series that would be English relevant that has like restrictions in JP right now is Overlord. So Overlord currently has a choose one of 4 between the 2 tap counter variants, the Shao tier that clocks a Vampire Bride to draw 1, and the 3/2 Ainz combo that everybody knows.
I feel like that deck is still too new to attract a ban, and also its results have been medium.
Yeah. I just wanted to bring it up because it is a relevant deck right now.
I really hope that, because if they do this, this would break the record again, because when they banned Seven Deadly Sins, it was, I think, the
Oh yeah.
fastest release to ban they'd ever done, including the emergency ban for Nisekoi in JP. I think. I think anyway. I'm not counting like Action Bastard and stuff like that. But I really hope they don't do that, because that would just make a lot of people quite upset because they bought a deck that just immediately gets banned. I think that's completely unreasonable. Um,
Yes. Um. So I guess we can talk a little bit about what we think the hits are going to be. I mean, you already alluded to Slime potentially getting hit, which is totally fair. That deck
I
is
think
like,
I think Slime is the best deck in the format. I don't think there's much to discuss there. Some people call it an inferior version of Alice. I consider it a version of Alice that starts up 1.5 turns later in terms of the walling thing. But unlike Alice, it doesn't have to play like 25 cards that do nothing after you get Alice on board, which I think is pretty
yeah.
good.
And I think the rest of the deck, I agree with you for the record that Slime is probably the best deck right now. Unlike Alice, that deck also is just very solid across the board in everything it does. Level 0, level 1, and level 3.
Yeah, it's as good as you can reasonably get for a non-climax combo level 3, but you can be spicy because you're playing like a bunch of
I
pants
mean,
already.
you have a stock swap. You have like, do you have really good healer fit? Like the Benny Mario is a card that I think is
Yeah,
like very
it's
very
good.
strong.
You are
Um,
as good as you can be without having like you're as good as you can be on the finisher side
yeah,
in
without a
English wise
climax, without a
without a
climax. Yeah,
climax,
yeah.
which
It's
is good.
yeah, and the level 0 and
And
level 1 are just really good too. So much better than Alice's level. Well, okay, Alice's level 1.
Alice is better at level 1 because it becomes, cheats at level 2s and stuff.
But as far as like
But
the functional, like what they're playing at level 1, Slime is quite solid. I think we can all agree on
I
that.
agree. I think so. There's like niche decks that can do stuff against Shizu, but generally, no. It's just uninteractive and decent. It does everything you need to get to the level 2 game, which is where you can really start being good.
So what do you think the
I
hit would be for Slime?
That's a really good question. I've heard people say that limiting Muran to 2, so being on the limited up to 2
Oh,
copies might do something. I
I don't know
disagree.
about that one.
I do not think that changes how good the deck is. In fact,
They
I think that they wouldn't do that,
they wouldn't
surely.
do that. Like it I feel like if they did that, it would just show a complete lack of understanding of like why the deck is good.
I
Uh
have heard people say like Muran 2-1 and then Shuna support, the 2-1 that
yeah.
gives the Shunas more power.
That is a
I think that's
very obvious hit, I think. Yeah.
Yes. I
Yeah.
think that would change Slime to a more value-orientated deck and take away the ability to completely wall people out of the game, which is, again, not something Slime needs to do. But if it does get to do that, it's actually, it's good, right? Because you
Yeah.
just get a turn of farming and you can maybe do it again because you play 8 pants or 6 pants or whatever.
We've seen similar hits in the past.
Mm,
Like when Dal got hit initially, they hit the one
the support
zero the 1-0 support, right? The back row.
and the 2-2. So
Yeah.
you couldn't get the two together.
Yep.
Uh, I
Um
The other
I
band that they
I
could feasibly do. Sorry, you go. You go.
oh, I get the sense that they might trial a restriction that JP is planning to implement. Maybe. Actually, to be honest, okay, never mind. It's probably not going to get hit in JP, I feel like. That meta is
I
like, so Chainsaw Man is currently the top dog in that meta by a long shot, so I don't
I think
see
yeah.
Slime getting hit
Un-
in JP at all
unless you
actually.
listen to China, who think Pixar stop.
Okay, well,
Nah, Chainsaw Man is both an incredibly strong deck and an incredibly unfun deck to exist.
dude, I'm hyped,
So
bro. I'm so hyped. It's going to be so much fun.
it is coming
Oh,
to English.
I love 1-1 events that go to memory, dude. It's
Don't
my
worry,
jam.
Guilty Gear will save us all. It'll be fine. So, do you have any other thoughts on what they might do to Slime? Because
Um,
they've previously hit the level 0 lineup in some decks, but I don't know if a choose one of two is going to be enough for that.
Based on what I think about the card pool, I feel like a fair hit is 2-1 Mijuran and 1-0 Shizu actually. I think,
That's cute.
and the reason why is because I think, okay, they probably won't do it. It's probably 2-1 2-1 Sheena, 2-1 Mijuran, probably. Or Shuna? Her name's Shuna. It's probably those two. But the reason why I think the 1-0 Shizu would be appropriate is because one, that card really helps the deck out in the first deck. It allows it to refresh on time, which is important for the Mijuran because it's a search combo that you want to just play on tempo and get the value, like greater value off the search. Second, it is a pants trigger, which is very good for recurring, any of your combos. And then third, it's a pants trigger. The pants trigger, the other aspect of the pants trigger, which is a soul trigger, which is quite underrated in a deck like this. And it's what separates it from Alice, in my opinion, a great deal. Like being able to run 8 plus one soul triggers in your climax lineup leads to better damage pushes, especially in first deck, and it leads to like more winning game states, especially when you're winning board, as effectively as Slime does. Like you don't even need climaxes to deal damage in this deck because so many of your triggers are +1 soul. And on top of that, and then the last reason is because I don't think I think there are worthy alternatives to this combo that exists in Slime already. You could feasibly run the what's her name, Xion combo, right? I don't think that much changes. It just makes the deck a little more vulnerable to level 1 pushes, level 0 pushes, which I think is appropriate for a deck like this.
I mean, it really does impact how well Muron can loop, which is, I think, pretty important to the deck.
Of course.
But yes.
But as far as like, you're still gonna get your Muron combo because it's a salvage combo, right? You still have like a plussing level 1 that's gonna attack for a decent attack value. You're just missing out on like, the extra soul, the extra soul. You're missing out on the climax recursion, right? I think those are like really big reasons why the deck is that strong right now. Even though I really don't feel that good about just taking out Shuna, because I think one thing that I think could happen if Slime is forced to remove Shuna from the deck is that we could see Overlord start popping up more, which I think is not a good thing. I think that deck is
I don't like the design of that deck, but we can talk
problematic.
about that
later. Put it simply, I think that forcing Slime players to get a little creative with the way they make their decks is a good thing, and that's why I like this hit a lot more than like the very obvious hit the hexproof, hit the 2-1 combo, effectively banning the Shuna, right? That's effectively banning the Shuna, right? So
they could also that is true. It's an effective ban, so I don't know if they necessarily do that. They could also do something like Muron plus the stock swap, the Milim.
Oh, that would also work. I think that's also.
I mean, it just really weakens the end game to a point where they have to become a full-on sustain deck because Benimaru by himself he's fine, but he's not great. So you either have to go into a hybrid climax build like what Riaz did, or you'd have to just hope and pray and cancel, which, as we all know, is not the most successful strategy you can ever do in this particular metagame.
And that leaves like 2 other mystery series, I guess. I think we both know the other one's gonna be Sao, right? Like I feel
it's almost like I think that I want to believe Mr. Twitter intern when he says that they're cooking, but I firmly think that the limited is going to be Hololive, and the 2 choices are Sao and Slime.
Oh, you think they're going to limit Gura to 2 or some other card?
I think Gura is the most logical one, but we'll talk. Now is probably a good idea. Now's probably a good time. I think that Gura to 2 is probably the most obvious one they could do. I don't actually think it hamstrings the deck that much, but it does reduce their killing potential. They no longer kill from like 2-4 or whatever. It's now just consistently from 3-0, which is in line with the rest of the format, right?
Yeah.
I do think that you need to hit that deck harder, not because it's particularly good, but because I think design mistakes shouldn't be allowed to remain design mistakes. And at this point, I'm starting to think Pants Trigger might be part of the problem, but that's neither here nor there. I don't actually think Ayame Gura is too strong. I but I
You
want them to
mean
see it.
yeah.
Not Ayame. What's her name? Azuki
Amelia.
Gura.
Amelia. Or
Uh,
Azuki Girl, yeah, sure. Yeah.
yeah.
That's
I
those are the
don't
two
think
combos.
I do not think Gura decks are too strong right now, but I want them to hit it in some way that doesn't impact the other Hololive decks, because those decks should not have to uh, get caught in the crossfire for the design mistake that is the Gura Soul Trigger deck. Uh, Again, this is just what I think. I don't know if that's going to matter to Bushiroad. But I think that the most likely thing that's going to happen here is Gura to 2. I don't necessarily think we need it. I just think it's the most likely thing that's going to happen.
Hmm.
The other frustratingly likely thing that might happen is we might see Nino 3-2 to 2.
Bro,
Because
okay, there's just no way. There's
as
no
much as they
way.
want to say they're cooking, I need to see evidence before
There
I
is
believe
no
them.
way. It
I
literally
need
only
to
has
see evidence.
one. It literally only has one top this season.
Yeah, I know. I'm aware.
It'd be
But
so
I just
unjustified.
do I mean they banned Kaguya, right? I
But
just
they okay,
don't
sure.
trust them. I don't trust them.
There's just
So
no
that
way.
the other one, and I think I've mentioned this in a couple of discords already. The spicy one I could see is what if the limited is Ayame?
What?
Put the Ayame 1-0 to
No,
2.
no.
It wouldn't be completely broken because you'd only have 2 copies.
No, no. Why
Let
would
them
they do
cook.
this? Why would they
Let
do
them cook.
this?
Just let them cook.
Then the other, so the limit is, then the other choose one or two would be Sao, presumably.
Yeah, almost certainly. I
Some
think
creative hit, like I don't
I
know.
hope I hope it's going to be something like Brainstorm, the 1-0 Brainstorm plus Asuna EP.
No,
Uh,
I think it'll probably be Leafa plus. It's either gonna be Leafa plus Brainstorm or Leafa plus maybe like the salvage event.
that's so weak
Uh,
though. That does
anything that
nothing.
I mean, it definitely hits the consistency. I'm pretty sure either of those two cards are pretty important for the consistency of the level 1 setup. No.
Talking about the percentages, I don't think the 1-0 event is as important as people make it out to be.
Okay, how about the
I
event? Okay, the event Rize and the event. We could just do that too.
that that I mean, event Rize and Leafa would be better. I think that if you're going to hit the consistency, Leafa needs to go because that prevents them from doing multiple Alice's on turn 2 going first, which I think, while not common, is also the game state that leads to the most frustration when it happens.
Yeah.
So I think that it has to have Leafa on the list no matter what if we're going to hit the consistency. But I think that it would be better to hit something like the Asuna EP.
Maybe I. It also prevents getting triple
Getting what?
Alice at level 1.
Alice to 2.
Yeah, they could do Alice too. I've seen that being mentioned as well. Um,
Uh, okay. How about we talk about what happens if Alice is limited to 2, Slime is one of the choose one of 2. What's the third one?
um, Hololive,
Oh
right?
wait,
It's Hololive.
they could wait. They could completely go Alice to 2, and then Sal gets a choice one of 2 as well, couldn't they? Let's
Okay,
let's let's
okay,
not
okay,
entertain that.
okay.
Let's not entertain that.
I
That's silly.
what I
Uh,
could see, they could also maybe preempt. I could see them preemptively hitting Overlord. If they're saying they're cooking, a preemptive hit like that would be kind of forward thinking in a way that we haven't really seen
yeah,
from these ban lists, right?
you'd be cooking so hard you give your entire player base diarrhea.
Um,
Like, why would you ever do that? That's
but
like saying,
yes,
"Oh, we should hit Azure Lane. We should do choose one of 2 Fuso Yamashiro right now."
for I'm down. For context, by the way, I think Sao is the most toppingest deck this format, followed by Slime. So Sao is like 19 or 18 tops. Slime is like 15,
Yes. Yes.
which is honestly pretty impressive considering Slime came out. Slime wasn't legal for one event. I think it like came out like September 1st, and there was like an event on September 7th that it wasn't legal for. So
Mhm.
Slime having that many tops is pretty impressive. Oh no,
No, no, I think that
sorry,
I
no,
don't think
sorry.
that's right. It's been
Slime came out in the summer. Sorry, it was Overlord that became
Overlord just came out.
Overlord came out in September. Overlord came out in September. Sorry, sorry.
Overlord's only had like a few tops, though,
Yeah, only like three. I think it's three.
but it's only been
Uh,
out for like 2 months and very few
yeah.
events.
I mean, they're not gonna hit it. I think.
I don't think so either. I have my own opinions about Overlord. We can get into that later, but I don't think Overlord's going to be on this list at all. I don't think that's fair to people who bought Overlord. And just because it's a poorly designed, inconsistent mess doesn't necessarily mean
Yeah,
that like there's no reason for that to be on the list right now. It's
I
probably
agree.
between Sal, Slime, and I think Hololive will be hit. I don't know how justifiable that is. Firstly, I don't think any single Hololive deck is broken, and secondly, I don't think any single Hololive deck has the results to in to need a ban.
I mean, okay, yeah. I mean, it is the third most topping deck. It has like, I think it's like
But
double digit tops, like 10 or
it's
something. But
it is divided between 3 or 4 different archetypes,
of
though.
course, like there isn't really like a glaring problem variant. I'm just,
Yeah.
um,
Whereas Sal is like they're all us Alice decks. They might have slightly different top ends, but they're all Alice decks.
I mean, God forbid
And
they do like a general Hololive restriction. That would
that would
be
be.
really bad.
I do think the Ina level 0 is a mistake. I think that card's problematic in a design sense.
Is that
But
the one that
outside of
bounces back
that,
to hand on cancel? Does it do that too? I forget.
no, that's ASCII,
Oh
isn't
no, it
it?
checks top
Wait,
two rearrange. It's checked top two rearrange and a climax swapper, and it has a soul trigger for some
it,
reason.
it the soul trigger is the problem part.
Oops.
Everything else is fine. Like the rest is a principal card. It's just the soul trigger.
Let's
Where
see. Yeah, it's top check two, rearrange in any order, and then climax swap and has a soul trigger.
But hitting Hololive's like utility, I don't think that's fair. I think that's the strength of the set, and it should remain that way.
Yeah.
If you're going to hit
Yeah.
something, you should, like I said, you should hit something like Gura, or maybe I don't know what your opinion on Kanata is. My opinion is not very high, but
I
you should hit something like Kanata, not like the Aqua clones or any of the like. You shouldn't hit stuff like Hearto or the stuff that actually can go in any Hololive deck.
they said they're cooking. Uh, and if they're cooking, like the
What if
obvious
what if it's
restriction is like,
Avatar?
oh god. I mean, okay,
Its
Avatar is like
conversion
what
is
6, 7 tops, but like
Yeah, but its
that
conversion is
looks
actually one of the best.
that looks so bad though. It's an
I
English
agree. I
exclusive
think it
set,
would
and they're
look
like
terrible.
banning it already. Like, um, I
Well, they've
feel
already done that with SDS, so like it's not as if they have much reputation to uphold.
yeah, but like Avatar is a property that I think holds a little more maybe cultural significance. I don't know how much they care about that actually. They
Isn't that
could
a
hate it
good thing
maybe.
though? Like that's there's no publicity is bad publicity. Like
Eh,
seeing Avatar be good enough to be banned, I think arguably would be good for the game from an outsider perspective. Think of all the clickbait articles that
I
could get
don't.
written.
But like, I mean, doesn't have the same issue as Hololive where it's like different variants topping, right?
Hmm. I think that most of them do have standby cards in them.
Let's
I
see.
the biggest advocate for it, Christian Jarbaka, Hijabi. I don't know exactly what his build is, but he keeps saying he's killing people from 2-5. So like, you know,
Let's see.
maybe there's
Atla
something there.
8 standby, bar standby, bar standby. It's top
They're
what,
all
3
standby
times?
variants. They're all like standby variants.
Top 6 times? Wait, no, there's no way. Yeah. It's topped 5 times, I think. Wait.
How
One,
many of
two,
those are
three,
Jabi?
four. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 tops. I mean, 2 of them were in the US, so it's definitely not him. And one of them was in Canada. So, and one of them
Fair
was in
enough.
Costa Rica. Okay. This Costa Rica, okay, I'm sorry to anybody in that area, but like a
Is
23
it four
person,
color? Is it the 4 color one?
what, the Costa Rica list?
Yeah. Or is it just a standby
Uh,
list?
no, it was just a standby list.
I mean, 23-person tournament, maybe not the most competitive field in the world, but it's still it's still top, still a win.
It's just like I mean, fourth place, top 4 at a 23-person event is definitely just way different from like top 4 to 170 man event, right? It's just like
This guy goes to like 2 Yu-Gi-Oh regionals, and now his perspective is completely changed.
no. I'm just saying. I I'm just saying. Like 23 is a very low number. Like obviously, congratulations to anyone that did well there, but it's just like because they didn't
it's
choose. Like
it's
it's not their fault that the event is 23 players. Like they played and they did well. That's awesome. I'm just saying like from a statistical standpoint, it is hard to kind of count these as like equivalent tops in the same way, like because like and
yeah,
it's a
it's
little
definitely
arbitrary,
different.
obviously, because like Sydney had like 56 players, which is also a little low. Like Bilbao had 49 players, low. But like, I mean, 23 players is like a locals, so like, you know what I
It's
mean?
smaller than a lot of locals.
Like, how many rounds even, right? Like, it would just make sense that
It's going to be 4 rounds.
it would just make sense that maybe like stuff that tops here probably would not top in other places. Like, there's two Kaguya lists in the top eight.
Didn't Nisekoi recently top?
I don't know. Oh yeah, this is also okay. This is also where eight standby quintuplets only top is for the season. By the way, in that BCS. So
Oh, so it's actually it was legit tournament then, obviously.
yeah, clearly. The other tops for quints were like Itsuki and Choice. Basically,
Yeah,
they both got like two
it's
or something.
yeah. There's been a few Ichikas earlier in the season, I think it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, but basically,
Um.
I think they could totally justify an Avatar ban. It would just not be as obvious as smack on the wrist for Hololive.
Sure. If they're cooking, then I guess so. This is all based on the
'Cause,
premise that they're actually cooking. Like,
yeah,
I've
like
also seen some copium where people are saying, "Oh, but what if the choose one of three for Data Life becomes a choose one of two?"
deck still isn't playable. Like,
You
I
think
mean,
so? Okay. I mean, I think like
I
okay, as long as the finisher is at two, yeah, probably not. But like,
how does that deck beat Overlord?
I mean, how
It
does I mean,
can't. Like, let's say that's a choose one of two. That means that presumably either Slime or Alice is still going to exist in some capacity. That deck also can't beat Slime
oh
or
yeah,
Alice.
Alice dies. Alice probably dies.
Sure, but that deck can't beat Slime. Like, how do you scale those boards? You don't get big enough on
Val?
offense.
I mean,
Dao.
that is true.
Like, it's not like how Nino gets to do that for free with a couple of modifications. Like, Dao, I don't think would do anything in this format, and I also think that they'd rather unban Mushoku than unban Dao at this point in time.
Banning Mushoku would be pretty cool. Um, that's probably not happening though, because I feel like they would have. I
They
feel
would
like
have
they would have
announced
said something,
they would announce an unlimit, I think, but it's not
unless
0%.
they're just cooking. Like I think a Mushoku unban would be very justified.
I think
Uh,
that'd be cool. I think that deck is vulnerable enough and has been scaled enough that it is no longer the boogeyman people once thought it was.
it would have a nice
But
niche right now in this meta. Um, I think a
I
lot of
think if
decks
you,
can't actually handle the level one board.
I
So,
have to wonder if you, well, it's mostly slime that can't handle it, right?
uh, I don't know that Alice can actually contest these. Like
You
assuming
reckon?
Alice gets hit, right?
I mean, I don't think it's the most consistent standby setup in the world.
It's pretty
Like
like
we have Hololive and we have Nino, and those are. I mean, I think
I
you've
mean
been colored by.
those don't really play for board like Mushoku
But you
does.
you get a shit ton of triggers with those decks. Mushoku, I don't think has many ways to optimize that.
Well, Mushoku just needs the climax. It's always been a level one climax combo deck. Um,
Sure, I guess.
it just needs because of the Ruger, like the consistency is pretty good.
All right, sure.
But I mean, a little off
If we're
topic
go-
at this point, I guess.
if we're gonna unban Mushoku, I'd like to see the rest counter come off for Quince. To be honest,
Oh, the event? Oh, that'd be.
yeah, the minus soul event. I think.
Okay. I'm
What if
down.
the restriction list update is one of the choice restrictions is the Quince pick 103 is just it no longer has this minus soul counter on it.
That would be wild. I feel like
That'd be
Ichika
sick.
Brainstorm coming off would be more likely, to be honest.
Yeah, but I don't want that. I don't
Okay,
care about
event
that
off of this
card.
would be sick. I'd be down. Um,
Yeah, so I think that the most likely outcome is going to be Slime, Sal, and Hololive. Those three will have something will happen. I think Alice will be mostly neutered. Slime will have to either rework themselves or be neutered. And Hololive gets a token ban, is what I think is going to happen.
Yep.
People are saying Avatar, but I don't know. I just don't see it. I don't think it's prominent enough, and I don't think it'd have a big enough effect on the format, and that would not fit under their definition of cooking. All right, let's talk about what the best decks are right now and why. I think we both already kind of said it. Slime is probably the best deck. It's the deck
But
you
after
should.
that, maybe a little
Yeah,
contentious.
I think so. I've talked a bit of shit about Sal. I still think that deck is maybe the best Swiss deck in the format because a lot of people just are not able to fight Alice or have not got the deck to fight Alice or just crumple under pressure. Lots of reasons. And I mean, that's not even a given. Like, doesn't Sal isn't obviously, uh, it's not even obviously a top 3 deck, depending on who you ask, which I think is wild. That's I think a good sign of format diversity. My issue with the format has got to do with what cards actually say rather than what's in the format. So what do you think? What's second best? What's third best?
I think Alice is probably second. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I think we just kind of have to acknowledge it's been doing really well and it's really good into a field that doesn't necessarily know what it's going to fight. It's just got good. It's good against people.
um, after that though,
You like Overlord though, don't you?
no, not really.
No,
I mean,
good. I'm
okay,
super
actually,
down on
okay.
Overlord.
If I think if Overlord is played properly, it is probably maybe third or fourth. And the main reason is, but like, it's just difficult to see it succeeding in a slime meta. Like that matchup is just bad.
Do you
Um,
want to elaborate? Because I know a lot of people think that Slime is unfavored against Overlord.
wait, really?
Hmm.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So do you want to elaborate?
Sure. Well, there's a crucial line of text on the Ein's field wipe that says it has to choose its targets to send to the waiting room.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, the slime board sets up a card that gives everything else, uh, you know, makes everything else on the board they can't be chosen by effects.
Mm-hmm.
So like the biggest gimmick, the strongest like the turning point that an Overlord deck would create is just gone. Like, and on top of that, Overlord isn't winning board against Slime either,
Hmm.
which is the other like pretty strong point of the deck. I think the way it can start dominating the board and rebuild the cards it lost to set up the
Mm-hmm.
Eins. All
Yep.
of that is gone. On top of that, and that just creates like a domino effect because the way Overlord is designed as a deck is that it kind of sacrifices everything before level 2 to just for that setup, for the sake of that setup, the field wipe into the like the constant healing and the burning and the winning board, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when it loses that, Slime is a very competent level 0 and level 1. I just would not think that Overlord is favored here. It's just not
Mm-hmm.
winning at all. And when
Yeah.
I say it's not winning, it's like I mean it's like the probability, the odds of it winning are just lower than it would
Low.
be
Yeah.
compared to like the other decks. And Slime is quite a popular deck as well. So when I think about like maybe in a vacuum, right? I would be comfortable saying Overlord is like top 3, top 4, but considering one of its worst matchups is currently a very popular and well represented deck. I just don't see it. Um,
Hmm. Fair enough.
and on
I
that
think
note, I
that that
think
is
maybe Avatar
hmm.
is third, maybe third, fourth.
That's actually what I was going to say. There's a couple of decks that are really repped by the Europeans that might not have as much presence in America or other regions, which are Avatar and Seven Deadly Sins, somehow the English exclusives. I think the Bar Standby deck is pretty good. It has fast deck speed, it's got a stock swap, it's got a strong finisher. It's a little, I mean, it's just, it's good. I think if you're allowed to farm with that deck and you get the support that says your opponent can't counter, and then you just get to reverse stuff. It kills people. What's there to say? That's all.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty. I think it's pretty simple. Yeah, like
There's nothing
it
particularly difficult about it. No.
it does strong things.
Hmm.
Um, very strong things. I think actually, it's like
It mostly
um,
just treads water until it gets to an Azula combo turn, though, which I think is fine. Just that's just what it is.
yeah. And it gets like a decent incidental advantage from like by triggering standbys.
Yeah, it plays
Um,
like a couple copies of. Well, you put the support out first if you don't have it. Then there is a 2/2 if that's correct to put on the board.
yeah.
It's just fine. Like I just think it's a fine card. You also just randomly get a lot of stock from random sources. It's kind of weird, but whatever. If that's what it takes to make a rainbow deck playable, then so be it.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think that that deck is really strong. It might actually be top 3, to be honest.
Yep.
Uh, and after that, we're running out of decks, to be honest. If you want to count different variations of Sao, I think that this might be where you put like Alice Argo. Uh,
Sure. Yeah.
I think that deck is very much it's a lot more all in, and it's definitely needs to have a good game to have a bridge to the end game. Otherwise, you're just stuck playing and attempting to loop the Asuna EP, which is not particularly strong in my opinion. So you either need to win it off the back of Alice, or you need to just have a ridiculously bad opponent who lets you do everything you want, even if Alice doesn't resolve. So it's one of those two, and I don't think that's the ingredients for a top tier deck, but it is a good deck.
Yeah.
Um, I'm I'm doing my absolute best to keep both Hololive and Overlord out of my top 5, but I think one of them has to sneak in. Um,
Askigura, I guess. My
I
issue with
hate that deck, man.
My issue with Askigura. Um, wait, let me see. Let me first see if what a card I think is relevant is actually being played.
I mean, I'm putting whole Overlord as my 5th deck. I think that it's just it invalidates too many other decks to not be here, and I think its existence is a big part of why decks can or can't be played. Um, I also think the deck is just reasonably strong when it works, and it does work most of the time. But you have a higher than normal degree of, oh well, I guess my deck shat itself. My deck shat itself, so I can't play the game very much now.
uh, well, maybe it's not as standard as I thought it would be. But okay, so
What
my issue with
is it level
Askigura,
0?
no, my issue with Askigura is that if it fails to get the Ame on time, the 2-1, right?
You know,
I thought more slime players would be playing this, but slime has access to a sack minus soul counter that I think
hmm.
is probably quite good with what it synergizes very well with what the deck wants to do. But nobody's playing it, so maybe I'm just blowing some smoke. I think there's just no way Skikura can win against slime because of that card. There's just like no way. If slime is playing that card, uh, Askigura is just losing board the entire time, and it doesn't get any reverses at all. There's just no chance.
Yeah,
Um,
it's pretty dependent on the on what's her name to get the double stock
yeah,
thing right.
yeah, for sure. So I mean, I guess slime players aren't playing it because I'm just looking through the list and nobody's playing it. So I mean, I guess Askigura is my fifth choice. Kind of like not really my kind of deck. But it's hard to. Oh, well, there's one list playing it. Basically, I think it's a very good Swiss deck. Primarily because in Swiss you're gonna run into decks and players that just won't be able to punish the deficiencies of Asgigura as well as stronger decks or stronger players can. Namely, how weak the deck is at level 0 and level 1. In my
Just a
experience, the deck usually is like a level behind. So, Gura maybe being able to kill from level 2 is like, I guess, just like pretty justified, to be honest, if the deck is just consistency like level 3 while the opponent is like early level 2, right?
well, yeah, I think that even with the high density of soul triggers, it still doesn't match up to other decks that just because like it doesn't
Because
even
I
have
mean, it
that many
needs.
more soul triggers than slime, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's and like it's just never winning board. It's clocking itself at level 2 to get more stock. So, uh, for my money, I think the deck's design is like, eh, eh, I'm not a fan. Like, I would never play a deck like that, but I think it's like relatively in line with how decks like that have been, like historically. Do I think it's
People
design?
love this sort of design though. It's the sort of
Yeah,
I'm going to be innocuous and not a big deal until my big pop off turn where I do something absolutely ludicrous. People have loved this particular design since the beginning of gaming in general.
for sure, for sure.
Uh,
And it doesn't feel good to lose to. Like,
no, it
dying level
feels awful to
2,
lose to.
it
Yeah.
sucks. But I mean, I feel like the results kind of speak for themselves. The deck isn't really dominating. Like the right now
It's
the meta
doing
is like all about having good board presence at level 1, level 2. Um
it is doing
getting
okay, honestly.
Yeah,
Like
it's doing
it's doing
okay.
fine.
It's doing okay. It's just not it's about where I would place like a fifth like ranked deck, I guess. In this kind of meta.
It's actually got a fair number of it's got 7. Is that 7? Yeah, so far it's got 7 in this last BCS season, which isn't bad.
Asgigura.
Specifically Azkigura, not any other whole variant. There's like an Azki Choco that won Austria, I think. But I think that's
Yeah,
completely reasonable. So like yeah, I just put Overlord there because I think Azkigura is just not a good deck. Yeah.
that's fair. I like, so the other Hololive deck I really like a lot is 8 Standby, but
Mm,
unfortunately that deck has a terrible Overlord matchup, so I would just
yeah.
it's also just a deck I would never play for that reason alone. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm definitely not a fan of just having an auto lose matchup.
Mm-hmm.
To a deck that people are definitely playing.
Yes.
If I had a read though, if I knew that no one is playing Overlord in the tournament that I'm attending, yeah, sure, why not? I because that deck is like really strong, assuming Overlord isn't present in the meta. I think it matches up very well against everything. Um,
Hmm.
so
Now, do you want to let's talk about Overlord specifically?
sure.
I think I think that it has a bad effect on the metagame in that it invalidates a certain subset of deck, and it's a subset of deck that people enjoy, which is
Uh,
heavy, turtley board-based decks.
right, and
And
losing your back row just doesn't sucks, right? Like,
I think there was a point in Weiss where that wouldn't have mattered much. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think back row is as integral as front row. And that's really irritating to have it be wiped out by one deck out of the entire field. You just got bad luck in Swiss.
yeah.
Do you want to talk about why this deck is good? Because I think you probably have a better grasp on its strengths than I do. I just
Yeah, sure. So, um, like the first thing, the level 2 combo, the thing you do at level 2 is that you cheat out a level 3 Eins that reads basically, marker this 1/1 event that um then gets sent to memory. Like, that's like the first turn of the combo, and then you do a second turn of the combo, and all those events underneath it go to memory. And then when you do that, you wipe your opponent's board, and then while the events are in memory, you can pay one, ditch one to burn one, and you can do that as many times as you want. They'll send themselves I don't think they send those to waiting room either. So you can just keep doing that over turns. Actually, I think as long as you
Hmm.
have the 3/2 on board, if I recall correctly. So I mean, there's that, which not pretty good payoff as far as payoffs are concerned. The thing that makes the deck exceptional, or like, because like normally it's just like okay, because the changer is like a pay one. It's a level 0 that's a pay one, ditch one, sack itself to play the Eins from hand. Like normally that kind of thing is just like okay, sure, like I guess if your opponent has the perfect hand, then I guess I lose. But like, what makes this viable? Yeah, you can keep doing the goats over turns. What makes this viable, more viable than most other strategies in a similar vein, is the fact that the deck has access to a clock draw engine, in the form of the Vampire Bride Shaltir combo from set one. It's a 1/0 Shaltir. You can clock a Vampire Bride from waiting room to draw a card.
That's another
Uh,
design mistake, by the way.
yeah, but like it's cool. Like I think the card was cool before it enabled lame stuff like the signs thing. Um,
Pretty much like because there's now a payoff. Even if Irons didn't, you know what? If Irons didn't exist and this deck was like only using it in 8 standby, the Albedo deck,
it'd be
I
cool.
think I'd be okay with it, right? Yeah,
That'd be
that'd be
cool. That'd be
fine.
cool. That would be fine. I think. I mean, it would be strong, really strong. Um, so you might be thinking of it like maybe it's not obvious yet, like what this does for the deck, but basically, Overlord, because like I think it's a little counterintuitive, right? A lot of people are used to this idea that you want to refresh on time level one, but this deck concept kind of bucks that idea, and it basically decides not to spend it like more than a turn at level one, and opting to just turbo itself to level two to get it to attack with its 3/2 Eins, because the major weakness of this Eins combo, so the because the level one assist that you would also play that combos with the same bar, it gives this 3/2 Eins hexproof and 4500 power across turn.
Hmm.
It doesn't gain the hexproof until your opponent's turn, so the major weakness of this setup is that the Eins is vulnerable to anti-change counters before you know it gets to do its thing.
Hmm.
Um
I mean, they can the decks that this is super good against are usually not the most aggressive decks in the world, so you can get away with side attacking some lanes. Like
yeah,
that's
I mean, and you're attacking with a
fine.
two soul body with a bar active, like it's siding level one bodies is totally fine. Um so with that in mind, like yeah, this is like a meta. This is a format warping combo strategy, what have you. It warped the Japanese format. It's continuing to warp the Japanese format, as far as I know, or maybe not actually. Maybe it might be Chainsaw Man. But while this deck was at full power, it was definitely format warping. Both in terms of what strategies are allowed to exist and how people have to play around it. Um,
One of my one of the really unfun dichotomies with Overlord back when it first released in Japanese was that if you played a deck that didn't give a damn about Overlord, aka the 1k1 soul rushy decks that didn't really mind their boards being wiped, that deck would lose to Alice. Like
yep.
you just that deck just can't beat Alice. So it created this really unpleasant dichotomy of you have to play a deck that can only beat one of them, and then you have this shitty lottery to go into where you might fight the other one that you weren't looking for. Of course, you could just play either Overlord or Alice. I don't think those decks particularly have an advantage against each other. Some people might disagree. I don't have a strong opinion on the subject. But when a deck has that sort of potential to create a conundrum where you have to play a deck that tries to address multiple decks, but it's really hard to do so because they attack the game in different ways, I think that creates a really unpleasant metagame. This is why I think formats like MTG Modern are pretty rubbish because you can't choose to attack anything. You have to be proactive and only proactive, and a certain subset of players is not going to like that. it's not an unskilled format or anything by any means. I just think it's really bad design. So
You know, it's interesting. Yu-Gi-Oh is currently having a similar debate about its current format.
mhm.
For a similar for the same reason. Um,
Yeah. I
yeah,
just don't think that's a good thing. I know Yu-Gi-Oh has had good formats in the past. I also know it's had tier 0 formats in the past, but I think when a format has 2 really good decks that attack on such incredibly different angles that being good against one means being bad against the other, that's really frustrating. But I
yeah,
think that what breaks it in this case is that decks in Weiss have gotten so consistent and proactively strong and able to recover that small weaknesses start to shine through. And I think one of Overlord's biggest weaknesses is that sometimes it just has a really shit game.
yeah. I mean, it can't play off schedule, which I think is a
Yes.
big weakness. Like, and it exposes itself to being, sent off schedule because its level 0 and level 1 are
You're
just so
gonna
weak.
yes.
Um,
And sometimes like if you sculpt cards to do the whole clock myself to level 2, get my game plan going, but then you like eat 6 damage unexpectedly, you are pretty behind because now your
yeah.
cards have less text than other decks cards do.
I mean, ideally, you're also wanting to just send yourself to level 2 manually via the draws,
Yes.
because like what'll end up happening. So part of the reason why it's so disgusting is that like you'll Vampire Bride to level 2, then you'll like Vampire Bride a couple more times, because
Mm,
like why not? Because the Vampire Brides are back in the waiting room. You can like clock them again for more value, to
mhm.
kind of like shore up the hand that you're losing by doing the signs combo. So,
Yes.
um,
I know some people are playing versions without Vampire Bride. What
yeah,
do you
they're
think of
playing
those?
those event. I mean, like the event version, right? That like
Yes, yes.
turbos out. Yeah, I mean, I think that version's fine. It's kind of concerning for the same reason that the main stream strategy is. Um, in some ways, it's kind of worse because I think the point of that build is turbo out like double consistently, which
Mm.
yeah, it's definitely not a cool deck. Like, it's
Hmm.
definitely super lame. Try to find
I
the
hope
event.
I hope you're not offending too many listeners.
I just
Hmm. Well,
it's
that's fair.
totally fine. Like, if you like that deck, that's totally fine with me. I'm just trying to find the event so I can know exactly what we're dealing with here. Um,
I'll leave that to you. So I think that we're both pretty unanimous in that we've got Slime and SAO and just kind of taking out the top spots. Avatar's a little bit more contentious, but I think that if you were to go out and buy a deck for the upcoming tournaments right now, your best bet would be either Avatar or Overlord. I think that neither is going to get hit, and both are incredibly strong decks. I think it also would be reasonable to buy a variation of Hololive, but as I said, I think it's likely Hololive gets hit. We just don't know exactly how. And I also said this, but there's even a possibility that uh, something gets unrestricted. So there's that wild card as well. I think that right now, Slime would be the best deck, but it is way more expensive than Alice. I guess if you're playing specific cards in Alice, it does close the gap somewhat, but just pound for pound, Slime is way more expensive. I
harder
don't
to
actually
find
know how
too.
expensive. Sorry?
Harder to
Harder to
find as
find, yeah,
well. Yeah.
because you need set one cards. And yes, there was a second wave, but that wasn't a particularly well selling wave. I think that only the people after the silver signatures cracked boxes because at that time, Slime wasn't obviously incredible. It was
I
just a
mean,
fine deck.
we didn't even know we were getting set 3 at that point. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
So
and just set two slime was it was
underwhelming.
a one of the decks of all time. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
I am now. I'll let you find that event.
I found
But
it. I found it.
all right, what does it do?
It's a 2-0 event. You choose a character, put it into stock, and if you did, reveal the top card of your deck. If the revealed card has one or more traits shared with the character placed in the stock, you can play the revealed card onto stage.
Sure. So
I
it's just
assume
resource cheating.
I assume there's some way to guarantee that the 3/2 Ions is on top of your deck. I assume there's some line there. Otherwise, like, what's the point?
Cool.
But there's probably some card. I don't think I care to try and find it, to be honest.
Understandable.
It's not exactly a deck I'm that interested in. So
yeah, uniformly, the players that I've spoken to, like the really accomplished players, are not huge fans of Overlord because of the fail case. But I think you have to respect that deck in terms of how powerful it can be and how it can invalidate certain strategies outright. Before we
yeah.
move on to our probably final subject, very selfish subject, do you think anything of Azure Lane?
Oh, great Swiss deck. Fantastic Swiss deck. I think we will probably see Azure Lane topping. I would be very surprised if it didn't. That's mainly because Fuso Yamashiro is broken. Like,
We love Burger Cats. It's just
I mean, it's just better. They're just better. Like, Burger Cats were sucked. Like, I'm sorry, Dean, but like, Burger Cats just sucked. Like, these Azure Lane cards are on a completely different level. Like, so for reference, for anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about, so there's a 0/0 Yamashiro. I forget which one it is. They're the two sisters, ship sisters from Azure Lane. They're both green cards. One is a vanilla, and one is a 500 power card that on play ditches a character to search the vanilla and gives that vanilla 1k power, 1 soul, and itself. Oh, it's the Fuso. Yeah, Fuso searches Yamashiro, gives Yamashiro 1000 power, 1 soul, so the Yamashiro will be a 4k power, 2 soul body, and Fuso herself gets 3k power and 1 soul if you have another Yamashiro on the board in your front row. So you are attacking with a 3/5 and a 4k body that are both 2 soul, and you get this for free, essentially. It is like the most disgusting, one of the most disgusting, like, going second plays I've ever seen in the game, like, ever. It's just so stupid.
You lose hand, but you're also like, basically you're doing a finisher.
You're not losing hand.
You're
not losing hand. You're getting a body. Like, you're not losing hand.
You're the turning... cards die because your opponents go to level 1 and just...
Okay, but what if they... what's even more disgusting is if your opponent just cancels.
Yeah, of course.
Like, I think at that point you just lost the game. Unless you can actually get over these bodies, which I don't think is very easy.
Not easy.
It's not easy. You run 4 of both. It's just, like, insane. And on top of that, I think there's, like, decent value that these cards hold later in the game because they're still, like, decently sized level 0 bodies. Yeah, they're still multi-soul. They're still decently sized. So
the funny thing,
and it's free. It's free.
Yeah, there's no stock cost. It's great.
I have to reiterate that the cost for Fuso is on play. Discard a character, or discard a fleet character, whatever, you know. Your entire deck.
I need to. It's consent, I think, in English. I need to be very specific with the way that I view this deck because I think it's something that a lot of people probably wouldn't immediately rationalize because there are conceptions that are very easy to have in Weiss. Azure Lane is a bottom-loaded deck. People talk about decks that like ramp up their resources to do a big explosive finisher.
It's like honestly as close to an aggro strategy as it's close to very get. Yeah. It's a very akin to like a modern day aggro strategy that the game has to offer.
We are doing our finisher turns on turn 1 and 2. We are not doing our finisher turns on turn like 6 or whatever. Azure Lane is doing its finisher turns on the first couple of turns of the game. And while normally that might be a difficult proposition because there need to be resources and there's consistency issues often associated, there's none here. This is just like a hyper consistent multi-soul, smack your opponent super hard, and all the outcomes are good for you. That's what it is. There's no fail case outside of not drawing the cards, but like it's just so strong.
You run so many like, and you know this sounds OP, but the deck is not out of hand because the rest of the deck is just like okay.
It just sucks. It's not okay. It just sucks. Like The Bardoor and
Yeah.
8 Bar and all the other variants are incredibly not interesting compared to SAO, compared to Slime, compared to Overlord, compared to even less powerful decks like Quince or Mushoku as it is right now, or Danmachi, or God forbid Chainsaw Man when that comes out. Like the rest of the deck just does not have cards with very good text on them.
If the
It's
deck had ways
just
to capitalize on the damage lead that these cards give you and continue to like give you, until like they're easily answered, the deck would be quite good. Um, as it is, I still think the deck is like perfectly reasonable.
It's fine. I think if you take it to a tournament, it would not be embarrassing, but you do need to make sure that you can play the game after turn 1 and 2. There are a few ways to do that. I think the Baltimore build is the most popular, but there are other ways to do it as well.
And there's a ton of cards, right? There's like if you want to, you can probably find some way to play this deck that kind of gives you a bit of an edge against like
it's
if you're meta calling, this could be a deck you could play. Assuming you're not playing Hololive, that is.
Yeah, I mean it's just a solid base to work off. It's just that the rest of the cards in the set are not as impressive as one would like.
Yeah.
Any other decks you want to touch on before we go to the deck that we somehow both own?
Nope. I'm
Nope. All
ready
right.
to talk
Yep.
about Nino.
Yeah. So,
Nino.
this is the deck that I've played most in the current Weiss format. I don't think that's the same with Tom, but
No, it's definitely the deck. I mean, dude,
is it? Fair enough.
I went home after Worlds and started playing this deck in like the Japanese version of this deck. Like I bought the Japanese cards so I could get like a lead on like practice time for this like this fall format. So yeah, it's definitely the deck I have the most experience on right now as well. Though if Slime doesn't get hit, Slime is probably the deck I'm playing for Anaheim.
I think that's probably a good call, but I also think that Nino is a defensible pick right now. I don't think it has any completely awful matchups. I don't actually think Overlord is a matchup you can't win because
Oh, I think
um
Overlord's a great matchup.
yeah, like it
Unironically.
might. Well, do you want to talk about it? You talk about it.
Sure.
You
Sure,
probably know
sure.
this better than I do.
So unlike other standby decks, Nino isn't particularly back row reliant in the same way that like 8 standby Hololive is, for example. Like 8 standby
Or
Hololive
just
needs its assists, needs its brainstorm in the back. It needs to like because it's relying on those for advantage, but um you know,
it's also just you don't need to have a full board in order to do the stuff that your deck does.
yeah. You have very high value like standby targets as well. Like level like the 2/2 is quite good. And the deck can play in a way where it minimizes the impact of the field wipe and can like outvalue and outdamage Overlord. Especially given that, Nino's level 0 is probably the best in the game, I would say.
The best to
It,
try
it-
fielding at any rate.
I mean, it's just disgusting. Like, if
I
for
mean,
anyone that doesn't know, right? The play is to play the Nino Clock Searcher. You clock a card from hand to search for a Nino. You search for this yellow card that has all 5 names on it. And that card reads on play. If your opponent has 1 or fewer characters in the front row, you can send that character to waiting room. And then also on play and upon being sent to waiting room, you can discard a character to draw one. So you search this card for free. So going second, right? This is obviously like a going second kind of play, but the deck is also fine going first. But you like play this turn 1 going second. You send whatever play they had at levels like turn 1 to waiting room. And you have like a aqua type effect, like an aqua Ricky thing. You like the Ichika from set 1. You clock top when sent to waiting room to check the top 2 cards of your deck and add all Quinn's characters you find there. I mean the setup is just broken. There's nothing else like it in the game. It genuinely I think it breaks a lot of rules about how level 0 like is supposed to be played.
And it does
like,
so while being an 8 standby deck, which I
yeah,
think is
and it does
not
yeah, of course. Like that matters a lot too. It like if it didn't do anything after level 0, then they wouldn't be relevant, right? Like it'd be like Azure Lane. But like
Yeah.
unlike Azure Lane, it has like a great level 1 combo. It has like the ability to hit very good power levels on all of its attackers throughout the entire game. Um it has a
You can
very
scale both Slime and Alice
yeah.
with the 1/1
Yeah.
back row.
Yeah, there's a 1/1 back row that they printed in the movie set that gives all other Ninos on the board this like Crush type, like this trigger check ability where you check on attack, you check the up to the top 2 cards of your deck, choose one to put on top, and then send the rest to the waiting room. Like, it is that card alone, I think, like kind of just breaks the deck. It
Yeah,
like it's like
good.
an extra free 3 cards milled every turn if you want to. It's optional. You don't have to do it if you don't want to, which I think is really nice. It's extra standbys triggered every turn. It turns all of your level 0s, like your entire deck, like, so part of the reason why it's so strong, right, unlike other standby decks where you're kind of like, if your board gets answered, right, you are playing bad cards until you trigger standbys, right? And if you're only attacking like 3 times a turn, it's a hard proposition. That's initially why a lot of people like poo-pooed on the idea of standby to begin with, because like, if your board gets broken, then you're set back by a lot because you're not playing like conventional Weiss, right? But this
Mm-hmm.
deck, if your board gets answered, you can just play level 0 cards that do like the things you want level 0 cards to do, and on top of that, they have this trigger check ability. You will probably start triggering standbys again and rebuild your board that way. So, and on top of that, every time you trigger standby with that card on the board, you can give 3k power to something, like 3k power. You don't even have to use the
Mm-hmm.
standby effect. You don't have to use the standby trigger effect. You just need to trigger standby. By the way, it also procs when you have the 3/2 climax combo active, because that card reads like the card gains a standby trigger, and the way the 1/1 reads, if you trigger a standby icon, you can get to give the power. So, there's a lot of incidental things that I think are not so obvious when you just look at the pile of cards, because I think a lot of people kind of got bored, tired of seeing that deck. Like I don't think a lot of people have like kind of like dived into it the way you and I have. Maybe I could be not giving enough credit. Maybe they have, and they've decided that it's not good enough. But I think there's a lot going for the deck. It has a
I
very
think that
strong game plan throughout the entirety of the game. Its level 2 grind game is very good, by the way, because of the Ichika changer. You can have like double heal turns that lead into like a climax level 3 climax combo at level 2, right?
yes. You also have pretty good power lines starting from level 2.
Yeah, if you want,
It's
you don't even
yes.
need to commit to it. That's the
No,
crazy thing.
you have lots of different options for a deck that doesn't have much in terms of ability to select for hand cards. You toolbox pretty well. Like you can't, if you want to play a defensive game, you can actually gear it so you counter Slime and Alice on the offense. This is, I don't think, as good as I thought it initially was, because that's just not how games play out. But sometimes you'll have a game where it's correct to put out the 3/2 support and then just stonewall Slime and get in some direct attacks. But like Tom said, you can grind really well. The Ichika changer plays are meaningful, and they do actually, quote unquote, give you a lot of resources in that regard. And while I don't think the finisher is particularly great, I think that it still does everything Nino used to do, and that's still fine.
I mean, it's
It
just
doesn't have
it's just so insane. Like the okay, because the clocks are just changes the dynamic so much. I think like not only is this a card that is super useful level 0, for consistency's sake, you almost always get at least one copy of your 1/1 combo. You almost always have like a playable level 0, right? You can just snap search a finisher for free, like no stock cost, and I like that's something that I think like Mushoku did a lot too. By the way, like Unfortunately for Mushoku, like its finisher is just a lot worse. Like it just had worse cards. That is not the case for Nino. Like your finisher is like fairly competent. It's like low cost. Um, can end the game.
Hmm.
It has it's not like Gura, but it doesn't need to be because the rest of the deck puts it in a position where it can end the game effectively a lot of the time. I think.
I agree.
There's probably a lot of that's probably where a lot of the disagreement comes from, right? Like
It's one of the most proactive standby decks I could ever imagine existing. And the biggest issue I've always had with standby is that it's such a passive deck that's slow to get started and often gets thrown off balance by a couple of bad turns. Whereas Nino just creates good turns for itself
yeah,
proactively,
for
which
sure.
is something. It's just something that most other decks, with the possible exception of Mushoku, um, have largely failed to do. Like an example would be Azure Lane's 8 standby deck, which is
Yeah,
garbage. I'm sorry.
like
It's just the every weakness of standby deck is magnified, and the only strength it has is that it beats other bad standby decks.
yeah,
Whereas Nino both manages to beat other standby decks and compete with other 1K1 soul decks. And I think that's why if our top 5 went up to 6, I would sneak Nino in there probably. I think that it's actually just a strong deck. I think there is more value to playing that than Ichika or Itsuki right now. Because I think while those decks are good, I think Nino brings something more specific to the table and is less beholden to drawing climaxes as well, which is, yeah,
yeah.
I think is a good thing.
On top of that, one thing I value a lot, from Nino specifically, that doesn't necessarily exist in like all these other meta decks. It it doesn't really care about refreshing poorly, and the reason why I say that is because um it can just turbo out any deck, any bad deck. Like because of the 1/1 assist, because of the check top 5, the pay 1 check top 5 at a Nino card that also happens to give you an extra free mill, by the way, by giving one of your Ninos a trigger check ability. There's just so much free milling that is
Well,
incidental
the
and
top
just like
5 costs 1, right?
yeah, but it's like but the deck doesn't care about the stock,
No, that's not an
which is
issue.
the crazy part. Like you can I've had turns where like I play that card, use it, salvage it back with the salvager, play it again, and I'm just out of that deck. I'm just out. Like,
Hmm.
oh man, I just refreshed the climax and I just I triple like I double canceled or like I triggered like like I refreshed the climax or triggered twice. Uh, I'm out of that deck. Like, or like hit a
Yeah.
brainstorm, I hit like 3 on my brainstorm. Like I'm out. Like I don't have to deal with that. Um, and not many decks can say that. Um,
Well, not many good
Notably,
decks.
not
Not many
many
good decks can say that.
not many decks can like do that, and also just like some decks can do it, but they're just spending their stock doing nothing. Like like for example, after Owls gets set up, if it has a bad deck, right? It's just like
You can
spamming
go
that
through,
brainstorm.
but then no
It's
resources.
spamming that brainstorm, right? It's
And
just
like
so it
and
feels so bad.
and like Dunmachi can do that as well, but it's just spinning its wheels. It's not going for any higher goal. So actually,
Yeah.
Dunmachi doesn't do that. It can't even play its game plan. So I guess that's a bit different. But
Yeah, and the great thing about the Nino deck is that it's completely optional. You don't have to
yeah,
do any of this stuff. It's
exactly.
only there if you need it.
If you
And
don't want to turbo through your deck, like if you have a good deck state, you don't have to. Just
you get to confirm clean triggers, which is crazy.
exactly. You
Yeah.
like it is good because after the initial, sometimes you have a rocky period at the start where you don't draw into all the level zeros you want, and then maybe you get a climax stuck in stock. But then after like turn 2, that's just never an issue for you ever again.
You also
And
never, yeah. I mean, there's just so much control over, what enters your stock, what ends up in your waiting room. Um, a lot of incidental things that kind of just add up, I think, to making it, you know,
it's a
it,
good deck, cheap deck.
and I'll put my money where my mouth is. If Slime gets hit, I'm probably playing Nino, like for Anaheim.
I am I'm almost definitely playing Nino for my BCS in like 2 weeks time. Mostly because I don't have slime and I don't want to borrow a deck that I'm not familiar
I mean,
with. But
it's gonna get hit, man.
I think that Nino is a good enough deck to bring even now when
By
Slime and
yeah.
Alice aren't here.
By the way, if Slime and Alice get hit, I mean,
maybe this deck is just
Yeah.
one of the best decks again, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's it, I guess. Like, I think the deck is phenomenal. Um, it kind of it like plays in the way that I've always liked to play, um, which is like, you know, not sacrificing elements of level 0 and level 1 for like a stronger finish, being able to control your triggers, not dying to just like bad decks randomly, um, having a strong grind game at level 2. I value that a lot. I used to play Fate, in unlimited Fate back in 2019. I love that deck, and a lot of the things that were strong about that deck are present in this deck. So I could be biased. I know
You do,
Alf
you do,
also.
you don't have a plussing refresh. I'd like a plussing refresh, please.
I mean, yeah, we don't have a. This deck doesn't. There's a PR that's a pay 2 on play
Yeah,
refresh,
yeah,
but
yeah. But it's not very good.
it's also not useful anymore. Like you just don't need it
You don't
anymore,
need it.
which is
You don't want to
crazy to
replace.
think about.
You don't want to replace anything on your board like this, and like you, yeah, just.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, I know a lot of people seem to underestimate the deck, which is fine by me. I'm totally fine with people not expecting this deck to like be played. Um, but for the past like half year or so, I've been doing pretty well consistently with the deck at locals, and it's not like my locals are free. Like they play meta decks. They're good players, so um, yeah, that's it. Like that's my
yeah,
spiel on 8 Stand by Nino. I think it's
it's a.
a worthy deck for sure.
I think it's not as good a pick as it was in its prime in the prime time, but I think the movie set has actually bolstered it significantly enough that it's a consideration. And even if it was banned down to what it is in JP, where the level 3 is limited, I still think it might be playable. It would just be a little bit muted at the top end.
Oh yeah, I mean, like
Like in
I've played.
English is what I mean.
I mean, I've played. It's definitely weaker without access to all four, just for a lot of reasons.
Of course, yeah, there's lots
But
of things that it wants, but I
it
think
still
that
does
the
what it
core of the
does. So
the core of the deck is still very strong and it's all there.
yeah.
This isn't a problem for you because you've got your, I think yours is max rarity or whatever, but I still confuse the 1/1 Ninos. I have misplayed
Oh
because of that. They look very similar in base rarity, and it's very annoying. But outside of that, I don't have
yeah,
any complaints with the deck. It's just a solid deck.
yeah.
All right, I think that wraps out largely what is worth discussing. To recap, I think that the restriction list has this sort of teaser. Again, I think is great because it just makes people think about what could be happening. And there's a lot of different configurations, right? It's maybe less cool if all you're showing is like one card banned or whatever. But even then, that really fosters discussion. So bravo to the social media team. I'm pretty sure the Japanese uh, teams have never done anything like this, as far as I'm aware. I know that they've said previously that there might be a ban list, but then that is applied and to both conferences with and without ban lists, whereas this is very clear cut. I think that's really cool.
Yeah. My only
Anything else you
complaint,
want to add?
my
Yeah,
only
go on.
complaint is that I think many people would prefer it if this kind of stuff were planned, like if there were just dates that people could plan around. Because like right, as far as I know, um, this ban list is coming out like 2 days before BCS, like a BCS in Australia, which I know people are upset about. Like I would be too. It's ridiculous.
Uh,
Um,
that is the one 20 minutes from me that I'm attending.
yeah, Oh yeah, Melbourne. I guess. Yeah, it's gonna
Yeah,
be effective. So we're gonna know what it is on the 11th, and it's coming into effect the 24th, which is 2 days before Melbourne.
26th of November is Melbourne, but
Yeah,
that's okay because
and France. Actually, there's a French one too. Like it's just absurd. I think.
I
I
think
don't
that
know
is
that.
dumb.
I think 2 weeks of lead time is not enough. Um.
Just so we know, I'll tell a little story. Australia is this place you may or may not have heard of, the bottom of the world, the ass end of the world, where shipping everything costs like $5,000 dues, and we have almost no supply unless some whale decided to splurge and buy several cases from Singapore or whatever. 2 weeks is not enough time for us to get cards at all. I'm not affected right now because I doubt my deck is going to be hit. But if I played Slime and I have no other deck, and I was expecting my deck to get hit, I would probably have to not go to BCS because I wouldn't be able to get a deck in time without extensive, like, maybe I specifically would be fine because I have connections, but most people would not. Like, we can't buy from TCG Player. Like, I hope people understand that you cannot ship to Australia with TCG Player. TCG Republic shipping takes like a month. And we don't have any good local sources for singles because of what I mentioned. All of that combines to a really shitty perfect storm that I'm able to joke about because it doesn't affect me. And a lot of players are able to joke about because they can borrow cards. But if you started playing like last year and are, from a more remote place or New Zealand or whatever, and were coming to Melbourne to play the BCS and don't have connections that might let you get cards, you might be completely screwed. And that's really shitty. And if Bushiroad or anyone linked to Bushiroad is listening, please, please give a little bit more notice, or at least make it so the people affected aren't people who can't get cards like Australians. It's it's just not good. It took me like 8 months to find 2 copies of
Oh,
one
man.
climax. 8 months. Do you know how ludicrous that is for a non-foil basic rarity climax? And I was looking, like I wasn't, willing to pay $20 per climax or whatever, but I was looking and I could not find it. And I know people. Imagine if you don't know people. Like that's my rant over Australia gets the short end of the stick on most things. We don't really deserve even more from like hobby game companies.
Yeah.
So yeah, any shout outs you want to make before we finish things off?
Um, no, not in particular.
No, me
Shout out
neither.
to
I
you,
think
man.
that uh yeah, I mean San Diego was fun. Hopefully we can do it again next year.
Yep.
Um yeah, long story short, the format is in a state of flux right before this ban list. I think that until then, we still have a couple weeks. I think there's two um tournaments before then. Is that right?
Before what?
Before the ban list comes into effect.
This is one. I think it's just one.
One, okay. So for that tournament, I still think Slime is probably the best pick. Especially if you like having a little bit more agency over how the matchup dynamic goes. But there's like 10 different decks, all of which you could play and defensively say was the thing you wanted to play because of good reasons. Like there's just a lot of reasonably competitive decks. There's just a couple that I think are out ahead of the rest.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you listened all this way, thank you. It's our first cast in a long while, and I'm glad to know that there's still people listening. But otherwise, any feedback, any other ideas that you might have or you might want to listen to us ramble about, leave them in a comment and maybe inspiration strikes and we do another cast someday. All right.
Yeah. See you
Thank
guys
you.
next
Thanks
time.
all.